Hello and welcome to episode 173 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, I'll be joined by my old boss, Phil Gramlich from Ear to There Travel. He's the author of the new book, Walt and His Park, Stories You Probably Haven't Heard. I'm excited to have Phil on the podcast because he played a huge part in the creation of this podcast, and I would love to start having more people on the show who are promoting their proud accomplishments. Before we get started, if you're new to the show because you're a fan of Phil's, do me a favor and subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel and follow me on Twitter at Rick_Ear. You will get fun Disney content and some other great stuff. For example, Phil is a Phillies fan, and I did a video recently from the Phillies Single-A minor league team in Clearwater, Florida from Star Wars Night. I was at Disney's Animal Kingdom for the 26th anniversary of the park last month, and I have been working more and more to incorporate charities into the mix as well. There are a lot of fun reasons to be subscribed to the YouTube channel. Let's welcome Phil Gramlich to the show right now. Thanks for being here, Phil.
Rick, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. And how weird is this? How weird is this?
It's very weird. So if anybody wants to know the reason that I have had a podcast for the past 3.5 years, it is because of Phil. I worked for his travel agency, Ear to There Travel, for a number of years. And Phil has a podcast, and he kept saying to everybody, yo, like, start a podcast, start doing whatever you can, get out there as much as possible. And even once I left because I just got too busy with everything, I still kept the podcast, and I'm so grateful for that suggestion because it's one of my favorite things to do every week.
And you have the voice for it. You sound so much better than I do when I'm talking up there. I'm like, everything I do, like this is like the third one of these I recorded today and yesterday. And I keep hearing other people talk, and I'm like, man, you sound so much better than I do, man. But no, I'm happy for you. This is really fun. This is so cool to be able to do this. And thanks again for asking me to come on.
So the book is Walt and His Park, The Stories You Probably Haven't Heard. 80 short stories about Walt Disney's life, his dreams, and the creation of Disneyland. So first of all, you know, when I talk about what made me decide to do this podcast, what was it that finally you were like, I got to put together a book? Like, I have these stories and I just need to get them out of me.
Like, I wish that I could tell you that's how it went, but that's not how that went at all. You know me, right? I'm always trying, like, what can we do to drum up business? I want to be better. I want more people to know my business exists. So about a year ago in last April, Amy, my wife, and I were talking. I was like, what if, like, I like telling stories. You've hung around with me a few times. You know that I like to tell stories. I never shut up. So I was like, what if I tell a story about Disney every day? Here's where it's very awesome to have intelligent wives like you and I do. Because I said, I'm going to email people a story every day. And Amy thought about it for a minute, and she was like, no. And I was like, no, that's really good. And she's like, no, that's really intrusive. And you're going to lose all the subscribers in a day. Don't do that. And I said, all right, well, what about Facebook? And she said, yeah. And I think that's good. So that's how it started. Like, it was like, well, I don't know that I'm a writer. I didn't know. So I just started writing stories on Facebook, and people started liking them. And then what worked is I had this whole archive of podcasts that I've done. I've done 450 plus podcasts. And I've talked to, like, you know, like these crazy Disney celebrities, and I've become friends with some of them. And that it's just like, okay, well, now that the people are listening to the stories and reading the stories, I have 1,000 more. I remember I told my friend Pat, who's been my friend since we were little kids. Literally, we grew up on the same street. 4 years old, we were buddies. He's still my closest guy friend to this day. About 30 stories in, because I told a story a day until the book was written. I tried to. Some days, you know, you can't. But about 30 stories in, he's like, yeah, he texted me. He's like, dude, I can't believe how well this is going. I said, I know. And he goes, you got to slow down there. You're going to start running out of stories. And I was like, oh, I don't think I am. I mean, here we are. I think I've probably told 350 to 400 or 500 of them now. They're all out there for free, by the way. That's the other model that we should kind of talk about. If you want to talk about, like, don't charge anybody for it until you know that people are going to pay for it. So that's kind of how it all came about.
That's amazing. And like you said, you have stories from some people who are like A-list, Bob Gurr, Raleigh Crump, Julie freaking Andrews.
That's a crazy one, right?
Where you are
Wow.
able to share these stories when you're trying to figure out what goes in this book and what stories, you tell a story every day on Facebook, but you're trying to say, okay, I want the biggest and the best for this book. What went into that process where you may be more likely to go, well, I got to put something from Julie Andrews in there.
That's that one, right? Like, I thought about writing this book, and I was like, I'm going to write it from I'm going to put this out there into the universe right now, right? The first person I'm telling this to, that's not my family. My ambition, my goal, my love is I want to write a Walt Disney movie or a TV show. It hasn't been done, and it needs to be done. And I've heard there are scripts everywhere in like the archives. They have them. Just nobody's made the darn thing yet. I want to do that. So that's like my biggest ambition. That's what I want to do. And I still want to. I have a storyboard in the other room. I wish I could show it to you. I literally have my scenes on a storyboard. I've been working on it since the book stopped. Since I finished book 1, I started writing book 2 and then working on the movie 2 or a show, whatever Disney wants to do with it. We'll figure, whatever they want to do. But I'll put it on Disney Plus. But the Julie Andrews one, I was going to do this story. The book was going to be just originally from like Kansas City through Disneyland. And I was going to keep it there, like through the opening of Disneyland. And that's what I had originally. And then, because that's the Walt and His Park, that's where that's where the title came from. And then I was like, no, but there's so many more that I can kind of squeeze in. Like the Julie Andrews one doesn't really fit into Walt and His Park, but it's Julie Andrews. You're going to not write Julie Andrews on the cover of your book? Yeah, you are. You're going to do that. You know what I mean? So I couldn't let that one go. But the other one's like Bob Gurr. I was lucky enough. He's just the super nicest. He's just a nice guy. And I got through to his manager and I asked if he would be on my show years ago. You remember these stories because I told you to these on in person, and we talked about this on the phone and on our Zoom calls with the agency. Bob was just like very receptive and was like, yeah, I'll tell you all the stories you want. And he like invited me to his house, and we sat in the backyard and drank Stella and ate Hawaiian pizza and watched the sunset. And he just told us stories about Walt for like hours. And I was just, it's the craziest, surrealist, nuttiest stuff that I've gotten to live through in the past like decade of my life. I can't even, it's crazy, man. You know how crazy it is. You saw me start.
When you hired me and we had the interview, one of the things that you said to me was, when did you like get the bug? Like, what is it about Disney that, locked you in and said like, this is a big part of my life? Now I'm going to reverse that and ask you, when did that moment happen for you when it clicked? This isn't just a vacation. This isn't just a collection of movies. This is something really important in my life.
Rick, I think it literally was. I was not a Disney junkie until I went to Walt Disney World the first time. And I can't remember the year, 1992. I think I was 13, but sometimes I'd say 12. My sister at 5 years old, I'm going to try to keep this one short, had a brain tumor and had to have surgery to remove it. And my uncle said, my mom's older brother said, when you get through this, I'll take you to Disney World. Before that, 12, 13 years, I didn't even care. I watched the Disney movies, sure. It was a really traumatic thing she went through. She recovered. She's doing great. She's 37, has 2 kids. They're healthy, doing awesome. So don't worry about her. She's fine. She's a pain in my butt. But the thing is, I went to Disney. We went to Walt Disney World. I went to Magic Kingdom. I remember my uncle remember those VHS cameras you would put on your shoulder and it had a suitcase that you had to carry around? So he had that. And I remember filming it. I remember filming Magic Kingdom my first night there. And I remember saying to my mom and dad, I need to know how this place works. What is this? What is this? Why is this here? What the heck? Like, because I had no concept of how big it was. Like Walt Disney World, if you've never been there and you drive and you're driving for 25 minutes before you find a park, but you're on property, you're like, what is going on? It was that. It was just like that sense of like awe and that sense of like, I didn't know how this works and I need to work here. Like, not only just, I want to work here. And I did. 7 years later, I was a cast member. So that's what it was.
What were some of the jobs that you had as a cast member?
My first one, I was hired Disney custodial. They don't even do the summer college programs anymore, I don't think. I was summer 1998. Shout out to all my the summer 98 CPs. I was the custodial host at the newly opened Disney's Animal Kingdom. I was in the Africa Asia section, which meant I was in the Africa section because there ain't no Asia in 1998. There was the bird show, and that was it. There was the bird show, and there was like a bench and a statue. That was it. And then I went back to Disney full time again after 90 in like 01 or 02 with intentions of staying and making it a career of Disney. I started training on the Great Movie Ride at Hollywood Studios, then the MGM Studios. But I had to move home. So I left and I never finished my training there. Never got to work a shift there. And then I moved back a few years later and I worked full time again. And I was at Star Tours. And then I worked at Fort Wilderness as a concierge at the front desk. So that's my Disney cast member career.
So this very much started for you similarly to the way it started for me. My family went when I was a little younger, but it was, you went to the Walt Disney World parks and that's when you got hooked on it. But this book is Walt and His Park, not Roy and His Parks.
Right.
So
that's right.
This is not about Walt Disney World. So when did the love of Disneyland come into the picture? When was the first time you went to the West Coast and saw those parks? And what about them made those parks the ones that get the book?
My favorite. It's my favorite. Like Disneyland Park is my favorite. Not only my favorite park, it's literally my favorite place on earth. Like Main Street, USA, at night with the lights on. There's no place I'd rather be. No place. And I think it was, the first time I went was my honeymoon. It was our honeymoon. My wife and I, Amy, got married in 2008. And great year, by the way. The Phillies won the World Series that year, right? You remember that?
I do.
Maybe this year too. 2008, we got married. We went on our honeymoon. And she wanted to go to Hawaii. She'd never been. And Amy's traveled the world. She's been something like 30 countries. Like she's been around. They just did that when they were young. Like my family, we went to baseball games and, tried to get season tickets to the Phillies. Her family went to Europe. So she was like, I never went to Hawaii. Nobody in my family ever wanted to go to Hawaii. We need to go to Hawaii for our honeymoon. So I hate flying, which is funny because I own a travel company. But I made a compromise with her. I said, if we're going to fly to Hawaii, I need to split that flight up we need to do 2 flights and do a couple days at Disneyland in the middle so I can finally see it. I've never seen it. And dude, that was it. I was hooked. I walked in. I went, you know what it was too? I went to the Disneyland Gallery that's in New Orleans Square. It's no longer there now. It's like the apartment, the dream apartment, whatever. I went upstairs and they had the Robert Olszewski Disneyland Main Street. And I didn't even know I was a miniature nerd, that I love miniatures. And when I saw that miniature in the gallery in Disneyland in New Orleans Square, I was like, not only do I love this place, I'm buying all that miniature stuff. That's coming home with me. And it took me a decade, but I have all of it. I own all of that stuff. So it was just like being there and just, you can touch what Walt touched. And like for somebody like me, man, that's what it's important. And it's just, I don't know. I don't know if I'm not a super religious guy, but I do believe in God and I believe in like angels and stuff and all that good stuff. You can feel his presence in the park. You can. I've been in his apartment twice above the fire station. And you can there's a feeling in there. Women cry openly. A lot of the agents, Rick, that we went with a couple summers ago. And I was lucky enough to get, I don't know, there was like 10 of us into Walt's apartment. Private tour. By the way, our tour guide was Michael Sinatra, Frank Sinatra's grandson.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But women and me, I got choked up and I get choked up easily, but to hear, see all these women who were in their 30s and 40s, just openly crying when you go in there, there's something to it. And that's, you feel it and it's tangible. And that's why I love Disneyland so much.
There is definitely a different vibe. I know that when you talk about how big it is over at Walt Disney World, and it's the opposite at Disneyland, and they have to use every inch, every foot. When they talk about adding something to Walt Disney World, they can do beyond Big Thunder Mountain, and there's just trees and land back there, and they can expand that park. But with Disneyland, if they're going to expand, they got to put it somewhere. They've got to, smash it into some corner somewhere.
You got to kick an old lady out of her house.
Right.
People put it in there.
There's no wasted space at Disneyland. And that's one of the things that amazes me. Like when you talk about wanting to know how it works, I want to know how they go about saying, okay, we're adding Galaxy's Edge to this park that's already like stretching the limits of its grounds.
That's just a weird fit, that Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland, right? Like it's so startling when you're out there and you're like, oh, wait a minute. You're in Frontierland and then you're on Batu. And you're just like, but they did a good job with the transition, as good as they can do. I was surprised that it didn't end up in DCA though.
I was as well, but what are you going to do? I enjoy their version of Galaxy's Edge. They try to do a lot more over there. They have more roaming characters than they have over at Walt Disney World. They're able to do that. That's another thing about Disneyland maybe we should talk about, is the character interactions.
That's the best.
So much different.
That's the best. So I'm my oldest and Alexa, she's 13 now. She's 13. Can you believe she's 13? I know. She was a little girl the last time you saw her, right? She was like 5 or 6, 7, she's little. So she and I are leaving on Monday morning. We're going to Disneyland, just me and her. I wasn't going to do it if the book didn't sell. Like if it went up on Amazon and then like it wasn't doing as well as it was, I was just kind of like, okay, I gotta let that fade into the background. That didn't work. But because it's doing incredibly well and so much better than I could have ever anticipated, I'm like, I got to strike while the darn iron is hot. So I'm going, and you're going to see me with the book in all kinds of fun places in Disneyland on Monday and Tuesday. But the characters, I can't wait to like show Belle my book. Like that's what I'm looking forward to, because I know she is going to be awesome about it with my daughter. We'll video it and it'll be something I can save. The free roaming characters in Disneyland, I get why they don't do it in Walt Disney World, because Walt Disney World's a once in a 20-year vacation and once in a 10-year vacation. Disneyland people go to every weekend. They need something different. They need something better. I get it. I understand the reason for it, but it doesn't mean I have to like it, because I love the interactions with the characters in Disneyland. You're right. It's the best.
So I think one of the things, because we are of similar age and you wrote this book, and I think at some point you start to say like, man, I want to leave something. Like I want to make sure that I make this mark. So you got to do it in terms of, and I know the Disney Plus show is coming, but you got to do it in this book. And what was it like just that first time that you tangibly held your book in your hand?
Here's what happened. There was a publishing delay. The book was supposed to come out on April 8th. And then there was a delay and it came out 12 days later. That has prevented my pre-ordered. There are 500 plus pre-ordered copies on a truck on the way to my house right now. And it prevented them from getting here before the book was released. So what I had to do was buy a darn copy of it on Amazon. That's how I got my first book. So I ordered a copy of it. So, like the Marty McFly moment with George McFly, he opens and Back to the Future and the book is right there. I didn't have that moment. I was like carefully ripping an Amazon bag open. But then when I did get out of the package, so I literally stared at the book and just didn't feel real. And it still doesn't. I see it around the house. We only have 3 copies in my house right now. People who are coming by are like, can I read your book? I'm like, no, go buy one. I don't have one to give you. Wait a week until I get wait a few days till I get my case. But yeah, it was so surreal. I appreciate you asking that, because I've been telling everybody who wants to know. I'm like, did you see I have a book? Did you see this? Did you see what I did? Like, I'm telling everybody. So yeah, it's just an incredible feeling, man.
And you start this where you would imagine somebody would start a book about Walt Disney, and that is in Marceline, Missouri. Have you been to Marceline?
I haven't. It's in the works. The plan is this spring shortly. I've gotten a couple of invites from people, which is, listen, again, I'm not name dropping. I'm not trying to like brag. I'm just telling you, like, I'm going soon. I'm going to do a presentation in Disneyland. I want to do a presentation for like cast members, and I want to talk to them about the book and heritage of Walt. So like something like this, it's bizarre. These things that I'm getting asked to do. I got like, there's something really crazy happened. One of you're familiar with who Virginia Davis is, right? Virginia Davis is Walt's like original actress for like the Alice comedies. My book comes out and her daughter reaches out. Virginia Davis's daughter reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I got your book, and it's great. And I was wondering if I could send you some stuff that I have about my mom." And I was like, "Yeah." And she literally, this is what's happening to me now. She just gave me the keys, not literally, but figuratively, to the archive, the Virginia Davis archive. I have access to whatever I want. And I said, first I was like, wait a second, you just give me, like, what is this? And then I was like, oh, you want me to write about your mom? So I wrote her back. I was like, I'm so dense sometimes, right? I wrote her back and I was like, do you want me to write stories about your mom? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's like, so now that's like 4 chapters of the next book already are Walt and Virginia Davis and the Kansas City days, because I didn't have a ton of information on that for this book. So now I will. So yeah, it said book number 2 is already in the works.
You have a chapter in this book, the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad. And one of my favorite places in Walt Disney World property is the Carrollwood Pacific Room at Disney's Wilderness Lodge. It's over on the DVC side. If you ever get the chance to just have a resort day where you're just going around to the resorts, spend a few minutes in this room. It has a fireplace and it really is dedicated to Walt's love of trains. Yeah. And recently, I guess it's actually not been recently, it's been like 2 years now, but we got the railroad back at Walt Disney World, and trains and railroads and transportation in general, such a huge part of the Walt Disney legacy. So what's this story about the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad? Where do you delve into that in your book?
You know, that was Walt's railroad that he built in his backyard in Holmby Hills. He built it and he didn't build the engine himself. Roger Broggie built the engine at the Disney studio, tested it at the studio. There's a really funny story when the engine was supposed, this isn't the story that's in there, but now I remember this one. When the engine was done, when the Lily Bell, the Carrollwood Pacific was the name of the railroad, but the engine was called the Lily Bell, named after Walt's wife, Lily. And it was finished. And Roger Broggie wanted to test it on the track, but Walt was not letting anybody test it but Walt. So Walt showed up on the soundstage with wearing a conductor's hat. And Roger Broggie was like, I guess I got to let him do it. Like, so he like talked him through it and like talked him through how to give it, I don't even know how trains work. Do you? How to give it steam or something? I don't know how it works. Yeah, that's the Carrollwood Pacific. And when you mentioned the room, the Carrollwood room in Wilderness Lodge, you didn't mention, I don't think, that those 2 boxcars or 3 boxcars that are in there were hand built by Walt. Like those were hand built by him. He did work on those, and he worked on the yellow caboose. So if you ever see that yellow caboose for the Carrollwood Pacific, he built that all with his hands, all him. He did all the metal work and everything all on his own. So, and the crazy thing about that is, Rick, when you're there, I don't know if you've been to the Family Museum in San Fran, you can touch it. Like you're not allowed to. Like I found it so fascinating that like I was like standing there with my phone and like trying to get the perfect picture. If I went like that, I can touch it. Like no one's going to stop me. They kick me out of the museum probably, but they don't ask me to come back. And I did go on a comp ticket. They probably wouldn't have liked that. But yeah, man, that's the Carrollwood Pacific, dude. That's what inspired Disneyland. I mean, his daughters did, and the Griffith Park carousel. But getting that to work and having all the adults be thrilled at the studio was like, hey, that's like a light bulb moment for him. Like, people are going to come. People are going to do this.
And there are a ton of changes that are coming to all of the Disney parks. And I think you just brought up something interesting when you talk about the carousel that Walt saw his daughters riding, and he thought, I need to do something better than this. I need to do something where a father and his daughters can go and spend an entire day. So that carousel was kind of like, I need to improve on this. But then the very first thing he puts in his park is a carousel.
Yeah,
so I think when people try to assume they know what Walt would have wanted, I think a lot of times we're putting our own views on that. So what do you think about the fact that these parks are ever growing? Like maybe you think Galaxy's Edge is a weird addition to Disneyland, but at least they are moving these parks forward each and every year. And we keep getting more and more added to Walt's vision. What do you think he would think?
I'm going to use Bob Gurr's answer partly because Bob gets annoyed when I say what would Walt think. Bob is very, he doesn't mess around and he doesn't mince words. And if I were to say something to him that he didn't like, he's like, well, I don't like that you said that. And just like, oh man, okay. It's very direct, right? So I remember once we were talking and I said, what would Walt have thought about Cars Land? I was like, it's an incredible land. It's so detailed. At night, it's beautiful. It really feels like the movie. Bob, what would Walt have thought about Cars Land? And Bob, I'll try to do my Bob impression because Bob goes, Phil, don't ask me questions that I can't answer. And I'm like, all right, Bob, sorry. He'd be like, Walt Disney was a genius. And if I try to answer for him, I'm not a genius. And I'm like, all right. And it just goes on for like 3 minutes. But so I don't know what Walt would have thought, but like he liked technology, right? Like he loved technology. He loved embracing the newest, the coolest things. So I think he'd be into it. Like I can't say he would be, but my opinion is like if he got to see Cars Land, if he got to see Galaxy's Edge, if he got to see, what the newer things, like I think he'd be blown away. He would be like, holy cow, how did you guys do this? Because he was every other time. Like the Rolly Crump stories, like Rolly would show him something him and Yale Gracie were working on for Haunted Mansion. And Walt's jaw would drop and he'd be like, how'd you do that? He was like that. He was just that guy. He was in his 50s and 60s. He was still that guy. So I think that's who he would be if he got to see it.
Yeah, it's so hard to predict what he would have thought about any individual thing. But I think just knowing that these parks are still progressing, and if he could see Walt Disney World, when you talk about not knowing what he would have wanted, that's not what he wanted. Like Epcot is not what he envisioned as Epcot. But I think if he could see that they took whatever his ideas were and they made it work in a way that actually was tangible, I think you can say he would appreciate those things. Like maybe the Community of Tomorrow was a pipe dream that wouldn't have worked, and somebody would have had to be the person to say, technology moves faster than that one, right?
They do that, and that happened to Walt. From what I understand, again, I'm not an expert. I don't pretend to know as much about Walt as a lot of the biographers and stuff who have done a lot more. Well, maybe I've done as much research as I don't like. I just haven't had access to like the archives, and I've been reading about Walt for 20 plus years, 25 years, everything I can get my hands on. But yeah, I think, he would have been very, very like into all of the new things and all of the new discoveries. And I think he would have wanted to figure it out. He would have, like he did go into it with just wide-eyed enthusiasm.
So we only have a few minutes left. And one of the things that I wanted to address is that you are the owner of Ear to Their Travel. And I think a lot of times people will listen to podcasts, they'll watch YouTube videos, they'll read books on Disney, and they'll think, man, I know this. Like, I know how to do this. I know how to plan a trip. Give me just very quickly a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, why you think somebody still benefits from going through a travel agent.
Look, first of all, we don't charge a fee. That's first and foremost. Second of all, you have people like me hiring the people who are going to do your vacation. I don't hire anybody who's not first and foremost, a Disney nut. But secondly, you did the interview with me. I tell every single person I interview the same thing. I say, I can train you to do this job. It's not hard. It's not a hard job. What I can't teach you to do is be nice. That's the most important thing. You got to be nice. And it's number one. And I think that's literally the most important thing. And that's what we have on Ear to Their Travel on a team. And if you're not nice, you're gone. You know that too. If you're not nice, I don't want you on the team. If you're not going to get along well with others, the reason why I think it's so crucial to book with an agency, and it doesn't have to be ours, but just make sure you do your research before you book with one, is it's changing a lot. Like you said, there's new stuff happening all the time. DAS rules have just changed to disability access. That's way different than it was a couple of months ago. Fast passes are no longer a thing. Now it's Genie Plus that people don't like. Paid fast passes. Like, there's so much to think about when you take a trip. You can't wing it. And you need to have, and yeah, you can go on and book it yourself, but you're not gonna know the ins and the outs like we do. You just won't, because we do this every day, you know? So you're going to have a great time. It's Walt Disney World or Disneyland or Disney Cruise Line. You're going to have a blast. But you're just, if you have someone who knows what the heck they're doing to point you in the right direction, it's going to go a lot better for your family. It just will.
And working for Phil at Ear to There Travel, it was one of the only jobs where the harder I worked, the less money I made, because the new deals would drop and I wouldn't even call my client. I would make the calls into Disney or whatever, and we would rearrange their package based on those new deals. And I would just call my client up and say, yeah, I just saved you X amount of money and you didn't even know that was happening today.
I love that.
My commission was less and I worked a whole lot for it. But those are the kind of things that happen where it's hard to keep up with every deal, every sale. When they announce free dining, sometimes free dining isn't the best deal.
There's another one that is literally next to it that people don't see because they only see free dining. And then there's another deal that's a 25% off deal that if you add your dining plan to it, it comes out less than the free dining deal. So you're exactly right. See, you did it. You explained it better than me. That's why you need an agent. Because it's so funny, Rick. I'm still booking trips. Not a lot, but I'm still handling a good amount. Maybe, I don't know. I'm like, right, if we have a list, I'm like right in the middle of like our sales. I used to be 1 or 2 every year, and it's just not sustainable when you're doing other things. Plus, it doesn't have to be because I have 43 people that work for me now. But it's the worst feeling and the best feeling because you're like, crap, I lost $88 on this, and then you're like, but I saved somebody $800, and that's why they come back and book with you again.
That's a customer for life, right?
Yeah, and that's what. When you did that, when you were going in and just saving people money, like they're going to come back to you when it's time to book because, yeah, of course. Are you kidding me? You looked at and like you didn't have to. We never even advertise that. Like I know it's a part of what we do, but nowhere do I have it written on a website. We'll get you a better deal. I don't, because what if we forgot, right? What if you forgot? But all of our agents do it for all of our clients, just like a good agency should. And it's awesome. And it is a really big time saver too, isn't it? To use an agent, you save a ton of time.
Absolutely. And there's somebody there if you have a problem. If you have a question, you can just shoot a quick email, shoot a quick text message. And I was always getting that, especially when the parks first reopened from the pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, that was a mess, wasn't it?
I was finding people from Canada. I was finding them CVS locations where they could get the test to get back.
That was a crazy time, man. What a weird time to run a business in, wasn't it? Oh my God. Thank goodness we're not doing that anymore.
So Phil Gramlich, the book is Walt and His Park, the stories you probably haven't heard. Man, congratulations on this accomplishment. I am so happy for you because I know how excited you are about it. And I was just as excited to share this with everybody who listens to us.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I really do sincerely. And you know how thrilled I am. Like I'm jumping around my house. Like literally every time I can't help but look at Amazon every 5 minutes and be like, it moved up again. And it's on Barnes and Noble and it's people are seeing it in stores and it's like, what? So yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. And we miss you at Ear to There Travel. You got a spot if you want to come back. We're waiting for you to come back someday.
And when Phil jumps around the house, it is really, really dangerous because of all those names he drops. Got a Julie Andrews sitting over there.
You don't know how exactly right you are. I have a sprained ankle right now. I'm not kidding. The other day I was running downstairs to do a podcast and I rolled my right ankle. So I decided to save myself. I would jump and land on my left ankle, my left foot. Because I thought I could catch all my nearly 200 pounds on my left foot. Guess what? You can't. I sprained it. And I went, it's this big still. I went to the doctor yesterday. They were like, what are you doing? So you had no idea how right you are about the falling.
Phil Gramlich, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Rick. You're the man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It takes a lot of courage to make your dreams a reality and do something like write a book. If you have the means, Phil is the type of person to support. He's raising an autistic child. He is passionate about Disney, and he is a really good dude. The book, one last time, is called Walt and His Park, Stories You Probably Haven't Heard, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a slew of other places. This has been episode 173 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We'll be back with a brand new episode next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.